Hello and welcome to another edition of Perito Talk. We are with us this evening a one-time CFO of AirAsia, a one-time movie actor as well, and currently an investment expert who advises a PE fund. Welcome, Vijay Gopalan.
Hello, sir.
It's a pleasure having you here. I look forward to having a meaningful conversation with you. We will today try to discuss across two slots as to what it takes to become the chief financial officer of a company and what it takes to stay there as the CFO. Incidentally, for those of you who do not know, Vijay is possibly one of the youngest CFOs of a reputed company. You have been in multiple companies across the last 10, 12 years after you left EY. Each time, I guess, the length of time that you were there was only about 2.5 years. Does that say anything about things there, or does that say anything about how you wanted to build your career?
Sure, sir. I'll try to keep it really brief in terms of why that happened. EY was an 8-year stint. I quit EY primarily when I was 28 to pursue my interest in movies and media and entertainment. So that was, in a sense, a planned exit to pursue something beyond the accounting realm. After that, when I joined Compass as the head of finance, the finance controller, I wouldn't have quit if I hadn't gotten this AirAsia offer. CFO of an airline company, Tata joint venture, too good to refuse, so I moved. So that was more an opportunistic move than a planned one. AirAsia, I quit, most of the information is now in public domain. So I quit due to certain circumstances, which I thought was good for me as a professional. Then I joined a company as a CEO for a brief while, and that was the only one where I really started moving a bit too much than to my own liking. Was the CEO for facilities management company for a brief while. Then I quit them, and now I've been with Tamil Nadu Infrastructure Fund, which is a private equity fund, and it's the 4th year running now. Okay. So barring that one small twist, everything else has been actually opportunistic.
Okay, let me ask you the next key question. I do not know how to put it across, but I'll try my best to put it as diplomatically as is possible. How did Compass pick you up? You were all said and done an auditor, working in an audit firm. How did Compass pick you up? And then how did AirAsia pick you up?
Sure, sir. Compass actually, for a lot of chartered accountants who are typically from the practice side of it, and if they're looking for a break in industry, I think as auditors, at some point in time, it is easy to move to the industry. So we don't need to worry about getting stuck in the audit profession. And in fact, I believe that as an auditor, you will end up making a fantastic finance professional. That was there. My boss was a director of finance on the board of Compass. He saw value in it, and that's how I moved into Compass. So that was actually a fairly logical.
He was the director in EY, right?
No, he was a director of Compass, but he was a chartered accountant. He is a chartered accountant. So obviously there is value that they see for people with a Big Four an audit background. And Ernst & Young as a name and my experience that really helped me. AirAsia was a lot more opportunistic, because when I interviewed with AirAsia, I was interviewing for the role of a finance controller actually. After the interview got done, the group CFO and the leadership in Malaysia made an offer saying that would I want to interview for the role of a CFO. And that's how it happened. So actually I didn't apply for the role of a CFO. So it again was actually opportunistic, sir.
So that was what, how many levels up from financial controller?
Sir, actually in most of the companies, if you look at it, finance controller stroke head of finance will end up reporting to the CFO.
Okay.
So actually it was one notch up, and that's about it.
All right. Now that you have said something which most people keep asking, is it possible to switch from audit to industry to another industry? Now that you have indirectly answered that, telling people that you have managed to do it, what is your own perception? Would you today in your company or in any company, if you are the guy who is hiring, pick up somebody who has been 10 years into CA practice, maybe in a Big Four or wherever, but hasn't been into industry? Would you pick him in industry?
Of course, upfront answer is yes, and it has. We have picked up people like that. At AirAsia, I had a 14-member finance team, sir. Barring one or two, nobody else was from the industry. No, nobody else was from an airline industry. And the airline industry has its own set of uniqueness that you need to be aware of. Even in the private equity fund that I am in now, in my own team, nobody is from the fund industry.
Okay.
Nobody's from the fund industry. They're all. Some of them have audit background. Some of them have diligence transaction background, but nobody from the fund industry. So it is possible, sir.
What is it that you would suggest to people who are, let's say, 5 years post their qualification? What is it that they should do in order to go up the hierarchy?
So I number one believe that a strong, as a chartered accountant, what really differentiates us from an MBA finance is the eye for detail and the eye for technical and the kind of technical knowledge that we have, be it from a Companies Act perspective, accounting perspective, or tax perspective. These are two things that I don't think we should ever lose out, and extremely important in the first 5 years to build a base on these things, and eye for detail and honing our technical skills. I personally believe that an audit stroke tax practice would give that kind of a platform where you're tuned to look for the fine print, and that's extremely essential in the first 5 years. If left to me, I'm a strong advocate of people moving in, getting into practice first, at least a couple of years post qualification, hone their skills in audit, and then move to industry, because then they'll get a holistic view, sir. Thereafter, the second thing is constantly reading up about the various developments. The disheartening thing that I see in some of the chartered accountants who come now for interviews, that their learning has stopped with their examination days. That could actually prove detrimental in the long run, especially if you're looking to, and I will speak about it as we progress, sir, about what really it takes to move up there. But I think these are two things that I would definitely want to underscore at this point in time.
You mean that their lack of readiness to continue with learning, that's one of the things that stops them from going up?
Well, that would be a bit harsh if I were to generalize it, but I don't think we would be far away from the truth if we were to make that statement, sir.
What do you think are the difficulties that a CFO actually faces when he's sitting there?
So, unlike any other business leadership, including that of a CEO, and well, I have been one, and I can definitely tell with confidence that unlike any of the other business leaders, CFO is probably the only role that has a very, very fiduciary responsibility, in the sense that it's a very trust-based role. Your stakeholders trust you, your board trusts you, the larger team trusts you. In AirAsia, when our capacity wasn't increasing, or when there were so many news articles about how the airline industry is loss-making, or AirAsia in particular was loss-making, they would immediately look up to the CFO at that point in time to figure out if everything's okay in the company. Would the company go bust? Or the salary is going to come in time? It's starting from there up to the governance stage. It's a very, very fiduciary role, and the first challenge comes in being able to live up to it and finding doing the fine balancing act in terms of ensuring that we work with a much more cleaner conscience in delivering against that role, vis-a-vis not pulling back the entire business in the name of trying to be overly risk averse, and that is going to be a huge challenge for anybody who's getting there, sir.
Now, this is true in bad times, or is it also true in good times?
So it's a way of life, sir. We can't really distinguish between bad time and good time. I think this is how a CFO.
What I meant is that the stakeholder looking up to the CFO, that happens in bad times only, or they also happen in good times?
Okay. In good times, they look up to the CFO in a very, very different way in terms of ensuring demonstrating that the profitability is increasing. Because at the end of the day, their own career growth, their salaries, so their career aspirations in terms of growth really depends on how the company is performing from a bottom line perspective. And we can sing a great growth story and continue being loss making and not have any increments even at a very basic level, not even have increments, and nobody's going to be happy at the end of the day. Also, there is a very, very subconscious divide in reaching out to the CEO directly. And who's the next person who has a lot of that information? It's the CFO. And CFO is generally not very flashy and flamboyant on the face of it. So it's a lot more easier to approach the CFO who seems to be a background artist in that sense, and then don't talk to them to say, "Sir, is everything okay? When can we expect this?" So it happens always, sir.
All right. There used to be a role called the COO, Chief Operating Officer.
Yes, sir.
Is it still there, or are those functions now distributed among the other CXOs?
Sir, I think, well, my view is that COO as a function is extremely relevant in a large organization even today, sir.
Okay.
But in a smaller organization, invariably the CEO dons the mantle of a COO.
Okay.
In fact, in my fund, till about recently, we had a COO and CFO, the same gentleman, an extremely inspiring finance professional again, Mr. Srinivasan. He was donning the role of both the COO and the CFO.
But is that not risky from a, I don't mean anything about Srinivasan, but
No,
somebody...
you're right. How do we put it? If you were to look at segregation of duties from a risk control matrix perspective, yes, I get what you're saying. But in a smaller organization, we will need to kind of bootstrap to ensure that we use the existing resources to be able to perform. So, I mean, a company with a capital of 10 crores, we cannot expect to have a CEO, COO, CFO, CCO, and a CHRO.
True. And all these guys come with, they're all white elephants.
No, sir, needless to say, sir. One of the reasons why all of us aspire to get that at the end of the day, sir.
Absolutely, I agree. First and most important is that, is it important for somebody to aspire to become a CEO? Or even for that matter, a CFO? I'll give a small example. It may not be very relevant, may not be very pertinent. The best guy does not have to necessarily be the CEO of the organization. I think in my generation, Tendulkar was possibly an outstanding player. He never went on to lead India, or maybe he led India, but disastrously and walked away. So what I'm asking you is that, is it necessary that everybody should aspire to become a CEO?
Fantastic. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for actually asking this, because in a lot of my classes also I try to touch upon this. So I think especially aspiring professionals need to understand that CEO, CFO, COO are mere designations.
Correct.
Now, there's nothing that stops a professional from assuming that responsibility in their own realm of work. And that is extremely important. As a finance controller, you can still think like a CFO. You can still work like a CFO. But there's nothing that stops us from strategizing. There's nothing that stops us from feeding our leadership with what our thoughts are. So that is well within our control. What the designation says, I don't know, sir. I was a CFO from a CEO. In this fund, when I joined, actually, I got told that I don't have investing experience and I will have to join as a consulting intern.
Okay.
And well, we took it up and it's paid off now.
Yeah. So I'll very quickly summarize what we have talked at this particular point in time. So Vijay says that the role of a CFO is very fiduciary in nature, which means that stakeholders look up to the CFO rather than to anybody else to know whether things are good and whether things are going to become better. He also tells us that while one may or may not become a CEO, one may or may not become a CFO, one may or may not rise up the leadership ladder, there is nothing that stops an individual from picking up that mantle in whatever job he is currently doing. It's like somebody once said, leadership without a title. Thank you, Vijay. We'll catch up on the other side where we will talk about your other interests, including in movies, and we'll talk about how COVID-19 has possibly disrupted the world in which we live in. Thank you very much.
Sure, sir. Thank you.